Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Chief Heat Officers and Resilient Cities webinar. The main goal of the webinar today will be for us to open a discussion about how cities can be proactive in responding to climate change and the impact of global warming. Particularly, the focus of our webinar today, a bit more specifically, will be about heat officers, the position of chief heat officers, and how we can build more resilient communities and build coalitions to deal with extreme heat. This event is hosted by the United Nations Development Program in Skopje, North Macedonia. And of course, we have a particular interest as an organization to open discussions and debates on the topic of resilience, environment, the intersection between environment and good governance, but also in particular, and to add to that, we have a vast interest in strategic innovation. In recent strategies that our organization has pursued, we talk about the importance of strategic innovation as an enabler of development challenges. And we also have a particular interest in community solutions that exist out there and what we can learn from them. So particularly because of this context, we are super excited to invite and to host today two external keynote speakers. We have Ms. Eleni Myrivili, the Chief Heat Officer of Athens. The Chief Heat Officers are both policy innovation, but also something that helps communities build resilience, which is why we're super honored that Ms. Eleni has accepted to be one of the speakers in this panel. The mandate of Chief Heat Officers is to find policies and build coalitions in communities to deal with extreme heat. We also have Mr. Chickman from the Adrian Arsht, Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center. Mr. Shickman and his colleagues have worked on creating a heat action platform that brings together academics, city officials, members from civil society organizations, and other actors to draft tools, methods of work to deal with extreme heat, which is precisely what we are looking for as UNDP to get further inspiration on how we can better create holistic measures to deal with climate change implications. We also have two internal UNDP speakers for this webinar. We are honored to host our resident representative, Mr. Armen Grigoryan, to our panel discussion today, and Ms. Anita Kodzoman, who is the head of the environment unit in our country office. We're also particularly humble in welcoming the audience of this panel discussion, which is comprised of city officials from our country, representative of different institutions, civil society organizations and academia, but also UN and UNDP colleagues from not only North Macedonia, but also the region. My name is Lazar Popivanov, and I have the pleasure to moderate this event today. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Armen Grigoryan, who can perhaps reflect on why this is an important event and an important discussion for UNDP to host. Adrian, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lazar. And once again, on behalf of UNDP, I welcome the panelists, as well as all participants of this webinar. I think for us in UNDP, it is extremely important to understand the trends. We all go through changing climate and changing lives. And we have done a foresight exercise for the country office of UNDP in Skopje to understand what are the scenarios for the future, including scenarios that are affecting the climate in our country, region, globally. Hotter temperatures, more severe storms, increased droughts, food scarcity are just few challenges that countries, communities are facing because of the climate change. This summer, we all know that the heat waves have swept the European continent. I think the forest fires in France are still going on, and heat waves becoming increasingly more frequent and intense, and with greater longevity as well. However, temperatures in Europe are not the exception. It seems that they have become the norm in countries like India, Pakistan, facing the brutal heat waves in April, and now in Pakistan, we are also facing the strongest flood. California, let's look at the California forest fires that are a result of a heat wave and very hot, unusually hot summer there. In the context of North Macedonia, the communities here have been struggling with the same climate change incited emergencies, including heat waves, droughts, floods, forest fires, storms, Some of them I was personally involved starting 2015 floods. Last year, Macedonia has experienced very strong wildfires and had to declare state of emergency in the summer period to address this. Approximately more than 100 forest fires that impacted almost 12,000 hectares of forest were going on in Macedonia last year. Cities have also been facing serious heat waves, with people and institutions trying to find policies and innovations that could tackle the challenge. What is evident for us now is that to solve these complex challenges, we need systemic, holistic approaches that will involve a variety of stakeholders. In isolation, I think nobody can do it. It's everybody's business, which is precisely why we are organizing today this event. And I would like also to say that the innovation policy approach of chief officers has been something that UNDP country office here in Skopje has been thinking for quite some time on how cities could conceptualize this and pursue the set of measures, design and pursue the set of measures to tackle this segment of challenges. We are happy to welcome Chief Heat Officer of Athens, a city neighboring from neighboring Greece that has piloted this position. I think one of the first in the European Union, and we are happy to learn that more about these insights from Ms. Eleni's work. We also wanted to learn more about how successfully organize and mobilize various stakeholders in the society for pursuing change and invited Mr. Kurt from the Extreme Heat Initiatives at the Adrian Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center. UNDP has done a lot of work in North Macedonia to support our cities to become more resilient, ranging from mapping the heat islands in the city, implementing cooling solutions, and greening our cities, supporting integrated development plans of cities, and supporting core development processes on national level. My colleague Anita will talk about these activities a little bit more later. Finally, this webinar hosts a range of participants in the audience, ranging from city officials, civil society organization representatives, members of the academia, and colleagues from other UN agencies. Welcome all to the discussion and hope we all learned from this experience. In concluding, I would like to say that disasters, including fires, floods, they do not recognize borders. And only by uniting our efforts, we can address them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Armen, for those opening remarks. We now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Eleni Myrivili, who is the Chief Heat Officer of Athens, to share her presentation and give her insights on the work that they've been doing in Athens. Ms. Eleni, the floor is yours.
So let's go back one quickly, because we can clearly see how densely built it is from this picture, right? It's like all gray kind of built land. And in the next slide, we will see that it has quickly, in the last few decades in the gray infrastructure, we will see that in the last about 50 years, we have managed to totally seal up to 80% of the land of the city. So all of the rivers we have kind of, except from one, we have put underground, and cement, asphalt, and concrete is basically the surfaces of the city to a really large extent. We can go to the next one. It's one of the densest built and most densely populated cities in Europe after Barcelona and Paris. We have very limited green areas. As you can see, the big green areas are mostly to the east and south part of Athens, and the west and north do not have any big green spaces. And the per capita percent of green in Athens is rather small in relation to all other capitals in Europe. In the next slide, we have to kind of just notice that and make it kind of clear that during the last decades, the temperature has been rising globally really sharply, especially in our part of the world, the part of the world that we share, the Eastern Mediterranean. It's one of the most vulnerable parts of the globe as far as rising temperatures. And in Athens, for example, we expect, if we go to the next slide, we expect a real significant rise of temperatures, about 2 to 2.5 degrees by the middle of the century. In 2017, we did our resilience strategy in Athens, which was very much bottom-up, and it was the first time that we had a climate action plan, both for mitigation and adaptation, that was part of the resilience strategy. But we understand resilience is a very kind of holistic way of approaching all of the city. It started from bottom up because with the people we figured out, and scientists and a lot of different stakeholders, we figured out what are the main shocks and stresses that the city has to deal with. And also together with the people, again, Mr. Grigoryan kind of mentioned that aspect. We designed about 65 or so actions that are the actions for creating a city that can handle better and bounce back better from any kind of crisis. So if we go to the next one, that was in 17. The first thing that we did, because all cities need that, is to get data, because we need data-based policy making. We started with the help of different stakeholders. The 4 maps that are up on top were created in 2017, which correlate socioeconomic status with heat pressures and with different areas that have to do different demographic data for vulnerable populations, the older people especially, and the kids. So where are the most kids and the older people, which areas are the most have most socioeconomic problems, and what are the where are the cool area cool stations that the municipality has created for the older people, where are the playgrounds that the kids can play. So putting these maps kind of together to figure out where can we have priority in the types of measures that we take in the city. In the lower maps, especially the one to the left is population. These are more recent. This year we made this, the population density. The second one has to do with all of the trees that we have in street lines as well, which play a really important part for heat also. And finally, on the right is land temperature from satellite imaging that we got, which gives us very detailed information, collapsing the last 5 years of experience that we have had in Greece. Where is the land temperature the most important, block by block in Athens, so that we can know, we have the land temperature and then we have the air temperature. And as far as the bodies are concerned, we're of course more concerned with the air temperature. But when we want to talk about initiatives that have to do with the public space, is a great indicator to have which blocks are the ones that are suffering more. And here in Athens, there's a very clear picture of where we have the most intense problems as far as heat is concerned. So if we go down, we had 2 different reports that came out in 2019, one from Moody's, which evaluated the capacity of Athens for loans and found out that Athens is one of the most extreme cases and for heat and for peri-urban fires and drought, and that unless it does really significant changes and works with adaptation, it won't be able to attract tourism, and a lot of its economic capacity will be significantly lowered. And there was another report that from 571 European cities, again, Athens was the first for the greatest impacts of heat waves. We can go to the next one. What is expected now? We have about 15 days of temperatures above 36 degrees. We are expecting for those 15 to 25 per year, we are expecting those to double or even triple by the middle of the century, because these numbers are going up more and more as we are getting new reports from the IPCC and from specific researchers, Greek and other European researchers. Specifically for Athens, we expect 2 degrees Celsius by 2050, rise of temperatures, but this, because of the urban heat island, the density of population and of the building stock is going to be multiplied, because the urban heat island basically exacerbates the situation that has to do with what the temperatures are. We can go further down. So we have a really intense urban heat island in relation to the, if you compare the center of the city with the outskirts of the city, we can get between 5 and 10 degrees difference when we have extreme heat in the summer. We have figured out that we have about 200 deaths per year that are based on heat, but these are only the recorded deaths. And from international experience, we know that this is the numbers are much, much higher, because most of the deaths that are caused by heat are not recorded as such. Like somebody goes with a heart attack or with a stroke to the hospital, it's not recorded as a heat-related death. We have, of course, energy related issues. Now with the energy crisis, we're going to have even higher ones of people not being able to afford turning on air conditioning. If they have, we have high levels of energy poverty anyways in Athens. Commercial activity goes down in the center of Athens when the temperature goes above 34. We've started measuring that. We also have a very big problem with insects. We have mulberry trees, which is about 20% of our trees in street lines are mulberries, and we have this really terrible beetle that has been attacking them starting 3 years now. In the summer of 20 to 21, we had loss of about 5% of our mulberries. Last year, because we had this intense, and now we know that when we have extensive heat waves, there's a collapse in the tree's capacity to withstand different attacks. So we jumped from 5% to 30%. We lost 30% of our mulberry trees in one summer last year. And this is absolutely difficult to wrap your mind around you. And of course, the peri-urban fires exacerbated from the heat. If we go to the next slide, thank you, Lazar. We collaborated. Oh, and with the last year's heat wave, actually it was really one of the worst we've had in the history of Athens. It lasted for 3 weeks, and we had temperatures that were higher than that reached 45 degrees, and many 2,300 deaths were attached to that particular heat wave. Next, please. We decided to work together with the Arsht Resilience Center, the city of Athens did. I'm working both part-time for the Arsht Resilience Center and for the city of Athens. And we decided to really join forces to really do a much more robust plan for heat. And we can go to the next one. I, as a chief heat officer, there are right now 6 different chief heat officers, and each chief heat officer decides their own approach to it. For me, the way I understand how to kind of build resilience in Athens was in 3 general pillars. One is awareness raising, because heat waves kill more people than any other extreme weather phenomena, and we don't really know that yet. We don't have enough data, but we know overall that even though we've been talking about global warming, we've been really not focusing on the fact that our cities are really suffering from heat, and that a lot of people are dying from it, and we know very little. So we need to raise awareness. We created for the first time and piloted this summer a specific, one of the things that we did is this categorization of heat waves, which puts the risk and the impact of heat waves within. It's not just pure meteorological, these categories, they also have the risk for human life embedded into each category, which is very important for communicating how dangerous heat is starting to become for human lives and for our bodies that are not made for these types of temperatures. Then we have a whole series of measures that are preparedness measures that are to support before and during heat wave, short-term measures to support the most vulnerable populations, and finally the redesign, which is the long-term changing of the city, redesigning the city to make sure that it's cooler. Next, please. This is the categorization of heat waves. We did specifically for Athens with the team, the scientific team for Arsht and meteorologists for Athens. We figured out for the last 3 decades what kind of heat sits on Athens and what type of specific phenomena of humidity, heat, atmospheric pressure, etc., give rise to mortality. And we correlated it, and they came up with this algorithm, and now we can actually forecast what is the risk for each heat wave that we expect. So this is a game changer, and Arsht has been really a leader for introducing this. And they did it in Athens and in Seville, and Seville did also the first time naming of heat waves, not just categorization. We have some other actions like the Cool Athens campaign. We are creating a heat climate story for communicating it. So this is all kind of awareness raising, but awareness raising doesn't mean anything unless it leads to action. So next is the preparedness part, which we have a whole series of actions which have to do with supporting mainly the most vulnerable populations, like a hotline, a website. We're trying to set up a buddy system, etc., etc. Many cities have done really great stuff, and we're learning from each other through the networks that we belong. Next, please. Finally, we have the redesign, which is the most important thing, because of course, everything else is things just to short-term ways of dealing with things to save people. But it's the really hard thing that we have to do is to really think of our cities differently and try to redesign cities. And the biggest thing that we can do right now, the best thing that we can do for heat, is to introduce much more nature into the cities. And we know that this is not something new. Nature elements as well as water to the surface, bring water to the surface of the cities. And use new technologies and new materials that are coming up, and figure out what we will do with our houses and our build sector. But what we can really do is reclaim the space from cars that produce more heat, and actually kind of in densely built cities like Athens, really reclaim the space and put much more nature into the space. We have a whole series of projects that we are trying to do in Athens to create new spaces, make green corridors, which we know is probably the best thing that we can do, connecting existing green areas, and etc., etc. Next, please. And pedestrianize and create kind of a larger canopy and raise the biodiversity of our urban nature in the city. Again, I really believe that our cities are not just going to be cooler if we do all these things, and if we persuade our mayors to have the big fight with the car owners and their parking spots, and be brave about that, but also we will actually have much more beautiful and livable and attractive cities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Eleni. And I would like to thank you for your speech and for those lovely insights about your work. I also would like to kindly ask the audience members who might have a question about one of our panelists to share it in the Q&A segment below. I also like to apologize to the audience members for my brief technological disruption of the webinar, but everything is going well, I believe now. Our next speaker is Mr. Chickman, who comes who comes in the role of the director of the Extreme Heat Alliance. Kurt, the floor is yours, and I will trust you to share your own presentation for this nice bit. Thanks.
Okay, let's see here. We looking coming through? Okay, hopefully.
A lot smoother. Yep.
Well, first of all, Lester, thank you for organizing this event and this discussion, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to join you here to talk about this. I'm the Director of Extreme Heat Initiatives at the Adrian Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center. So I wanted to just briefly touch on a little bit of the work that we do and some opportunities on how we may be able to collaborate, where we can learn from what you do and what you're doing in the cities and communities you're working in, and what we might be able to bring to the table in terms of heat programming. So just a little bit about our center. We're fairly new. We launched in 2018. and with a goal to reach 1 billion people with resilient solutions by 2030. So we do that through 4 key sort of program areas. So the thematic focus of the organization is heat resilience. That's the section that I lead, and I'll talk mostly about today. But we also work within the gaming industry. So we have a partnership with major game developers, game engine designers, and so on, to not just incorporate resilience education and ideas and concepts into games, but to really embed them deeply into the gameplay. And that reaches the 3.2 billion people that play games every day. We have an individual and community resilience program. This is based mostly in India, where we're delivering specific resilience solutions around home garden kits and those sorts of things that can also provide some cooling benefits. And then connections to the broader sort of global policy and finance institutions, both the sort of large traditional ones, but also new and innovative spaces, to allow us to move away from just thinking about pilots and opportunistic growth, to really start to think about heat resilience and other resilience measures at scale. So why a focus on heat? I'll start here. I think Mr. Grigoryan did a great job of explaining just the broad spectrum and broad nature of the challenge of heat. This is just a few numbers that I think help capture a little bit of that broad spectrum of the challenge. But the reality of it is, you can approach this issue of heat from a wide variety of different angles, because heat is an impact on every aspect of human life and every system, urban and otherwise, that support it. Everything from our mental and physical health through to our hard infrastructure. So the security of our electrical grid, the viability of our transportation networks, the use of electronics that we rely on day to day. Heat has a negative impact there, and often not, as Eleni noted, often one that is not well recognized. Oftentimes, heat is a disaster that is compounded with other disasters, wildfires, hurricanes, or other storms, which makes the recovery from those challenges even harder. And we've seen this in the U.S. and California, where firefighters had to actually pull back from brush fires, not because of the temperature from the fire, but the temperature of the air made it unsafe for them to continue working. So there are these compounding challenges that heat generates that we often don't recognize. I'd also say it's, we talk about this in the context of disasters, which are immediate events, things like emergency departments that fill up, or health infrastructure that is overwhelmed with people because of the temperature, or an electrical grid that will go down and cause challenges. But heat is also a long-term and even generational problem. So, for example, when we look at impacts on education, children that learn that are learning and exposed to extreme heat actually see a 6% reduction in their educational attainment the year after, compared to children who are learning in spaces that are cooler. And this is an impact that will carry forward throughout their lives. And so it's not just an immediate challenge; it's something that will affect our ability to thrive and survive into the future in a variety of ways. And of course, I think it goes without saying that all of the impacts that I'm describing, all the impacts we talk about with heat, are borne disproportionately by those that have the least capacity to bear them. And that's primarily the urban poor, marginalized informal communities in our rapidly growing urban spaces. And there's a variety of reasons why that's the case. And so in addition to the sort of physical and sort of tangible impacts of heat, we also have the heat really exacerbating the existing, racial, social, and economic inequities that exist, and bringing those into sharper relief. So it is, in all senses, a full spectrum challenge that we're trying to address here. So I wanted to share just briefly kind of how we're approaching that. And so this will run just a few times. So if you don't catch it on the first round, I apologize. It will stop again. But the way we approach our work at Arsht really falls into what I call 4 categories. And you're seeing some of the cities we work with to do this. The first is the idea around creating enabling environments for resilience. So as you heard from Lenio, we created a position called the Chief Heat Officer. This is, and as she ably described, this is both a position that coordinates across city agencies and stakeholders, because as you can imagine, with a broad spectrum challenge, it's touching every different aspect of that city's operation and the people that live there. So having someone that can collaborate and coordinate those activities towards a coherent and actionable plan is one of the key roles that the Chief Heat Officers play. But as you can also see from Eleni, it's not just an inward-facing role, it's a championing role. So it's a role that looks more broadly to help people understand the challenge of heat and to think about their programming, their investments through the lens of heat. And so it really goes both ways. And we have chief heat officers in Athens, in Freetown, Sierra Leone, in Santiago de Chile, Monterrey, Mexico, in Miami, and soon actually in 2 weeks, we'll announce one in Melbourne, Australia. And we're working closely with the chief heat officer in Los Angeles as well. So these positions are different by city. In some cases, they're secondments. In other cases, they are working directly in the city government itself. So it's a little different by place, but in all cases, they're really the focus of the heat work. We also work to build actionable awareness. Eleni also mentioned the idea of a heat season and the sort of media campaign that you can do around that. In the US and in other places, we often have mayors stand up and announce hurricane season in the sort of east coast of the United States, periods of time where the risk is greater for certain types of disasters. We're starting to do that for heat now as well. And then I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but I think one of the core pieces of this actionable awareness is the development and launch of health-based early warning and categorization systems for heat. So we're moving away from just talking about warning systems that are based just on weather conditions, but what those weather conditions will mean for the local populations based on historical impacts that they've seen there. We also work to make the case for action. And so in the US last year, we launched a report that looked at the cost of heat in terms of lost labor productivity. So output, commercial output, but also lost wages. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We're about to launch next week the second round of that, which will look at 13 cities around the world. And those are actually the ones with the yellow bars there. And then the most exciting piece for me, and which I'll talk probably most about here, is supporting implementation. And that's the launch of our Heat Action platform, which we launched with a series of partners back at the World Economic Forum in May, and our Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance and how those work together. And I'll dig into that here in a second. So let me start with the Heat Action platform. What you're seeing here is sort of a conglomeration of work that's been done by our center, by our partners at the Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance, but also other groups like the Rocky Mountain Institute, UNDP, Mission Innovation, and others that have been putting work into how we address the challenge of heat in a holistic way, in an inclusive way, and in an effective way. And so what we developed was a roadmap that would take a city official from not having any sense of what to do about heat in their city or where they have a problem with heat. As Lenio noted in her talk, the sort of data-based approach to this, to a process that will help them assess the local risk in terms of the heat, but also in terms of vulnerability and exposure, how to plan for that in an inclusive way, what a series of policies and technical solutions that can be scaled and to the specific needs of that city, depending on the development, the climate, and many other variables, and then how to implement some practical ideas around how to implement, and I think most importantly, how to evaluate the efforts that you've done. So a sort of a methodology of how to assess the work and evaluate the work. So the link is at the bottom of this page here. What you're seeing is the policy toolkit piece of the platform. What this allows a user to do is to put in those boxes there, really dial in and customize the type, not only the type of city or the type of community that they're working in, but also different moments in a sort of the policy calendar, if you will, when certain policies and measures maybe make most sense. So for example, there may be some that would make the most sense to adopt when you're looking at a large new development or you're approving a large new development. Others may be just enabling opportunities that should be done right away. And what you get when you go through that is you'll get you can see there are 90 results. This is what one of those cards will look like. So it's a solution and it's a policy lever that help you deliver it. So for Cool Roofs, for example, there's also a card on incentives and on governance and so on. And so what you see here is this specific information that you get through this policy tool. So it's a bit of an overview. It's the policy lever itself. It's when that policy might be best implemented. It talks a little bit about the benefits and costs. And then each one of these cards, and there's over 100 of them, has at least one and ideally more than one case study that it links to. So there's a real world example of how this has been done somewhere that you can dig into and connect with the folks there. I guess what I'd like to point out here is this is not a dry off the shelf document. This is a living document. This is something we're adding to all the time. And so this is something that we're always looking for new examples, new ideas. And so it's an invitation to partner and work together on this tool to make it, to continue to make it relevant and to grow as the space grows. And it's also, I'd say, an engagement opportunity and an invitation to engage with us more broadly. And I'll get to what that means here. So as the city's going through that, each city is going to approach the challenge of heat based on their own local context. And that will be different in different places, even if the menu of options is very similar. And so we have the Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance within the Adrian Arsht Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center. And this is an acknowledgement that the challenge of heat requires expertise across a wide range of disciplines. And so we pulled together over 50 experts and organizations that can help everything from architects and engineers, climate scientists, health and disaster preparedness experts, and so on, that can work with us and our other partners to help deliver the specific challenges that cities are facing as they go through the heat action platform. So there is an implementation focus to that work, and cities can engage with us through that platform to access this network. I talked about this. So this is the heat season campaign. It's available in 6 languages now. We're looking at adding some additional languages for this year. And this is what I mentioned earlier about and I think I covered it, so I'll leave it here, and in case there's questions in the chat about it, I can go into more detail. But the idea here was to test a ranking system for heat waves. We've done that in Athens. In Seville, the ranking system also includes a methodology to name heat waves that are sufficiently dangerous. We did see one of those heat waves named this summer. Heat wave Zoe was the first named heat wave ever. So we're now in the process of evaluating the efficacy of the program. So did the system work as intended? Did it work as it compared to the weather-only system that was in place in both places? But also, how did the messaging make a difference in people's behaviors? So this is going to be an ongoing process for us to evaluate this, with the ultimate goal of moving this into through the existing Met services at the country level and the WMO and others at the international level. And I should mention that just last week, California became the first state in the country and to create a mandate for ranking heat waves at the state level. And so this is something we'll be working with the state on. So the 6th largest economy in the world will actually have its own health-based ranking system over the next few years. I mentioned the cost of heat. So as we talk about a full spectrum challenge, obviously economics is one way to look at that. What we found in the U.S. today is that heat is costing workers and businesses $100 billion. And that will only grow into the future. And so, as I mentioned, we're launching a study that will look at that at an individual city level in 13 cities, including Athens. I think we've covered the chief heat officers. This is some of the chief heat officers and the mayors that they work with. I don't have Monterey and Melbourne on here. My apologies. And just a little bit about what we've been able to accomplish, both as a center but also as partners. And I think that's a really important piece here. And so I'm looking forward to this discussion. And I think primarily what I to just get across from my side is that to highlight Mr. Grigoryan's comments earlier, that this is not a thing we can do on our own. This is a thing that has to be done together and in partnership. And so within that spirit, I look forward to the discussion and opportunities to collaborate with you all going forward. So thank you, Laza.
Thank you so much, Kurt. I would also like to thank the audience members for asking questions in the Q&A segment. We'll answer those questions right after our final keynote speaker for today's event, which is Ms. Anita Kodzoman, our colleague and head of the Environment Unit. Anita, the floor is yours, and I trust you'll share your own presentation as well. Cheers.
Thank you, Laza. Our resident representative provided a bigger picture of activities that UNDP is implementing in the country in terms of how we are helping the country, the cities and communities to better prepare and how to address some of the main hazards, focusing on floods and forest fires, and also trying to do a shift from purely response and recovery mode to prevention, to early warning system and building capacities of the emergency institutions, but also building resilience of communities and cities. Therefore, in my presentation, I will just focus on what we have done together with the city of Skopje to address the problem with heat that the city of Skopje, the capital, is facing, especially during the summer period. And some of the concrete activities that we realized together since 2017. So this is a verse from a well-known song, Skopje, by Macedonian band Lepisol, that is well-known in the region. And it says that Skopje has a microclimate, scoring summers and freezing winters. This is really true. And people living in Skopje know that well, and the one that are visiting. Skopje is a capital and has about 500,000, according to the last census, 500,000 inhabitants, but there are a significant number of people commuting daily into the capital from the region or beyond. And the rapid urbanization, urban growth is increasing the city's ecological footprint, which is becoming unfavorable. There are issues also with high air pollution, etc. And we are also working together to address with support of other donors. In 2016, we have started to work with the city of Skopje on the development of first climate change strategy, Resilience Skopje, and it was adopted in 2017. So similarly to Athens, at the same year, the city of Skopje adopted its strategy. And as part of the analysis done within the vulnerable sectors, vulnerabilities to climate change, and also thinking about measures that can be done to mitigate the negative impact, what was identified was the increase of temperature as elsewhere, and also significant number of heat waves that were occurring. So the numbers here that you see, of course, from earlier years, but this trend is, we can confirm that this trend is really continuing of the increasing number of the heat waves, that comparing, for example, from the situation in 1986, 2005, that period, it could be expected that the heat waves will increase to 18 heat waves per year. And if we go beyond that, up to 2100, it will go up to 60 heat waves per year. This might even increase, but these are the scenarios and predictions that are based on the information that are available at the moment. Therefore, in 2018, after the adoption of the strategy, we started to think together with the city of Skopje how to start realizing some of the measures that are part of the strategy when it comes to adaptation. And we partnered with the Faculty of Computer Science and Engineering, FINKI, from the University of Cyril I. Methodius in Skopje. And we organized airborne imaging of urban areas with thermal cameras, RGB cameras sensitive to red, green, and blue band of light. And on 25th of August 2018, there was an area recording with RGB cameras of approximately 213 square kilometers. So around 4,000 images, RGB images, were recorded, and then all this data, vast of data was then taken by the Anadolu University from Turkey to put together first thermal map and geolocated RGB map for the city of Skopje. We were lucky to find a lady that was PhD student at that time in Anadolu University, who is from Skopje, and she was really willing to help us to work on this and put this together. I will later provide direct links to the map where you can find this, and where we were exploring with colleagues areas where we lived, finding out whether we are in a hot part of the city or we are still good in terms of heat waves. You can see in parallel some pictures how of some of the pictures of Vodno Mountain, some of the deforestation, then images of the city central parts, and clearly you see that there are a lot of areas that are red, which means that these areas are very hot during the summer period. I have specifically chosen to show the football arena, which is near to our office where we are, because you can see that the central terrain is green because it's natural, not artificial grass. And then the area smaller one where they're using for practicing football, and where I usually see children practicing, they're these young footballers, is very red because it is artificial grass. So you can see immediately the difference of when making choices, what kind of materials to use, how it affects or can affect the life of people. As I said, the macro analysis, and this is the temperature profile of the city of Skopje, based on these GPS logs from the flight that took place in 2018. And it's very clear because there is a range between maximum surface temperature on the periphery of the city and in the center city, and it's 7 degrees. And in the mountain of Vodno, which is the lungs of Skopje, it's even much higher. It reaches 12 degrees. Of course, this Gradski zid or city wall has the highest temperature at that time, and it is continuing. And also comparing to Kisela Voda municipality, which is, I would say, peripheral area of the city, shows again significant difference in the temperature. Of course, the river Vardar has a positive impact, and it's lowering the temperatures around it. And what is well known, the high temperatures are recorded in areas with reflective roofs. Again, what kind of materials you use later, it has a consequence. Micro-locations analysis were done again by the Faculty of Computer Science and Engineering, but they were done in 2016, and the faculty was using also analysis from Vodno to center of Skopje, but also using data from global study of heat islands made by the Center of Earth Observation from the Yale University. So again, this is central part of the city. What you see in red is the main square and the main buildings. What you see as blue is one of the streets where the Swiss embassy is located, where there is a nice row of trees, and that is why you see that they're not that much affected as the central area or the square where there are no trees. Of course, I mentioned the reflected white tiles that were chosen for the square are making problems. Darker rooftops are showing significant hotter than the other one that are lighter. Parked vehicles, of course, accumulate heat and then influence the temperature around the streets where they're placed. And of course, the shades from the trees and absence of cars, as I mentioned, on Maxim Gorky Street, are showing very, very positive results. Immediately after we did this screening and identifying what are the hottest spots in the city, we worked in prepared in an action plan with very concrete measures. They are ranging from some policies to action and measures that citizens can do, some innovative measures that can attract people, but also some. And then we started together with Skopje, realizing one by one. And of course, the idea is that the city of Skopje in their budget will allocate every year funding to further realize the measures that are chosen as the one that will help the city most. Here are the green roofs we have built in the last 3-4 years, 2 green roofs. One is again in the central city area where the main square is and where the results show significantly high temperatures. So there are pictures before how it looked like, quite abandoned, and afterwards. And I'm happy to say that still this is maintained, and this is a place where people, citizens of Skopje and others who are visiting are going there, and it become a place where certain cultural events are organized. And this is the second green roof on so-called House of Culture. This is also built in the city of, in the center of the city, and it is used for the same purposes. Erosion, on the left side, you see Vodno Mountain. I already said that this is the lungs of the city of Skopje, but it is suffering from erosion. That's why we, together with Skopje, we did, and the Faculty of Forestry Engineering, we mapped the erosive areas and then developed a plan, action plan, how to address it, because it is extremely, extremely important. There are issues also with urban planning and behavior of people, but this is one of the, I would say, hotspots for interventions when it comes to what the city of Skopje, with the support of the government, has to do, because Vodno Mountain and Matka, which is nearby, is protected areas. We also did the reforestation of the slopes of the Kale, and that is near Vardar River, and then that is also area visited by citizens of Skopje, but also by visitors. And we implemented anti-erosive measures, and I can say that these trees are still alive and they are doing, they are serving the purpose. There were certain things that are still pending to be realized. This is a proposal for greening the lot in front of the Skopje Zoo. So technical documentation is prepared. So once the city finds its own resources or donor resources, this can be realized, because this is an area, especially during the weekends, that is extremely visited place, and something needs to be done because, again, of the concentration of people and vehicles that are parked in front of the zoo. Also, the city of Skopje in 2017 did their own study for establishment of green corridors along the 2 smaller rivers, Serava and Lepenens, because they wanted to create a network of green areas and green infrastructure in the city. And we took this and then developed technical documentation. These green corridors are designed or to provide integration of nature, of course, and biodiversity protection with urban planning, and to ensure interaction of population, and then to improve at the same time the urban planning. So this is ready, waiting for funding to be realized and to be later used as a showcase of how to do it. This is an activity for establishment of a green cadastre for the city of Skopje. This one of the activities that we initiate immediately in 2017, and we continued. We were doing that in several phases together with the public, of course, city of Skopje and the public enterprise for management of green areas and parks. So far, around 150, almost 150 streets were marked. and then with all the attributes. So the idea is to identify also where there is concentration of green areas and where this is missing in order to focus the plans for future greening space in areas where this is missing. The people from the public enterprise were trained, so the idea is that they will take it over and continue to maintain this important the cadastre, because it is important for the city. So you can see some of the areas that were already marked and then can be seen in the green cadastre. Last but not least, we collaborated with GEL company from Denmark on redesigning the central area, so-called Ring. People from Skopje will know this. And we wanted to show how the urban planning should be more people-centered and help people to live in a better environment, better conditions. So this is just a proposal, but also to mention that as part of the other project interventions, we develop guidelines how to mainstream climate change in the land use planning. That is responsibility of the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning and the Agency for Urban Planning. And also another thing, we're piloting the DRR mainstreaming in development of the detailed urban plan from one settlement, one smaller village, and then developing guidelines how this should be done. These are the links to information and blogs that were done for the experience that we had, and there you can find this on Skopje Lab, the city Skopje Innovation Center. We worked with them for quite some time, again, to help city of Skopje to address its environmental footprint, but also to strengthen the capacity of the public administration to provide more improved or better services to its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita, for those reflections. And with that, we have now concluded with the opening segment with the keynote speeches, and we can proceed with the questions and answers. I'm happy to report that we have questions from the audience members for all the panelists, and I would like to encourage audience members to keep on posting them so that we get as many questions as possible until we try to squeeze in as many questions as possible until 3:30. So the first question comes from Mila Jovanovska, and Mila is one of the civil society activists and leaders in that sector, and it goes to Ms. Eleni. So Mila asks, climate change measures are not really popular and are sometimes uncomfortable for decision makers. So how do we prepare, or how do you prepare, Eleni, and support local governments to implement these measures, like the reduced parking lots example that you used in your presentation? And also there is a second part in which Mila asks if you've managed to cooperate with citizens directly for the creation of your plans, and if so, what were the mechanisms for their inclusion? So let's start with this, Eleni, and then there are a couple of more questions coming in. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the question. I will start from the second part, or I'll talk about the whole thing. So I think that people in government are often scared of involving different stakeholders in the planning of different projects. And it's very difficult I think for mayors and for people that are used of using power in ways that are quite singular to actually allow for a more multivocal kind of condition for decision making. With the previous mayor in Athens, we got him to the point that he was less scared. In the beginning of his term, it was really difficult to engage. He was willing to kind of talk with people very much with something that was almost ready, and to take feedback from the people if they liked it or if they didn't. But really, it took several years to get deputy mayors, and other decision makers in the city to accept the co-designing process, and also to kind of even for budgeting and even for other things, slowly building up capacity also for the people to know how to participate and to know how to help co-design things. So first it starts from the head. The head has to be open to it and to be listening to it if you are trying to create a plan in a municipality, because of course it involves a lot of issues that have to do with planning, with regulations, with law, a whole system of legal issues and all that, and government law, whatever, regulations. So the second thing is to really be committed to the process. So the process of engaging people often means that you have to really take it seriously, and not to do it once and forget about it, but actually to keep being consistent and persistent and keep kind of discussing with the people even after the project starts kind of being created, to actually go back again and again and again, so that people feel more like they're part of the process. So now with this, this new mayor, and in the second phase, this is more kind of embedded in the different things that we're doing. So it's part of the design that we have, kind of these processes. The type of processes that I like more, because I'm an anthropologist in training, is to do interviews and to do workshops. So I like much more the qualitative rather than the quantitative types of participation. The other thing that's always been in our minds when we do these types of design is to always include in the stakeholders the people that usually we don't hear their voices. So this is always a challenge, because we really have to think hard when we do a stakeholder plan for a city, which people are not in, we haven't included, and try to really figure out the people that we haven't included. How do you speak to them? What are the ways of approaching them, and how can you really listen to what they're saying? And kind of, this is all hard, and it needs time, and it needs commitment, and it needs people that are passionate and dedicated to be working within the municipality, that are willing to keep it going. It's not simple, and it's one of the hardest but very important aspects, because as we see all around the world, we really need to have people participating in the projects that we establish, especially, as you said, when they are not popular, to make people understand why it's good for them, like why it helps with their wallets, why it's cheaper, how it links with energy costs, how it links with traveling, etc., etc., etc. Like, you really have to make it clear why they should care about it. Climate change is often something that people think is far away. They don't, it's not really a priority. So we have to translate everything that we do in the things that the people really care for. And this is like, we have so many crises that we're dealing right now, that people are a little bit kind of freaked out by all of these things that are happening. So we really have to make it simple, and we have to explain why it's good for them, for the people, in the ways that they care. So that's my answer. And that's not simple, but we really have to get people on our side with all of these things that we're doing. Otherwise, we're doomed. And our initiatives are doomed too. Long answer. Sorry I took so long.
No, that was fantastic. I just want to underscore something you said, Lenio, and that is that, especially with heat, oftentimes the question isn't, how do we cool your neighborhood off, or let me show you these great things we can do to cool your neighborhood. It's actually the reverse. It's hearing what's actually important to that community, and then talking about these interventions in the context of those outcomes. So, for example, I worked with a city that wasn't worried about temperature for its sake, but had identified a link between high temperatures and rates, how frequently children were coming to the emergency room with asthma related challenges. So for them, we focused the entire program around how you reduce asthma interactions with the emergency department because of high temperatures, and used the asthma rates as the way we figured out whether or not we were successful. In other places, it was we had a community with extremely high unemployment in the sort of young males unemployed were having to travel 6 to 8 hours to work. So the program there was cooling their buildings with cool coatings, but it was done in a context of creating local economic uplift. And so I think if we turn this around and not go with solutions, but rather hear what the challenges actually are, it's almost never going to be heat as the number one challenge that they're going to identify. But there is a way to talk about this that doesn't have to mention climate change, that solves their problems while also by building and strengthening their resilience to heat.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that answer, Kurt. The second question comes from Pavlina Zdrava, and the question asks about effectively what mechanisms organizations have to identify heat islands. Particularly, what did you use in your identification, be it satellite imagery or some other tools that are at people's disposal?
Is that for me or for Anita? Anita, you guys in Skopje have done a great job with that kind of stuff. We have used mostly satellite information. We also are trying to do air temperature, which you need sensors. We don't have a good enough network of sensors yet in Athens to be able to do that. We have a couple of research programs that we're running that we're getting some data from them, EU research programs that we're running. And working with different scientists to get this type of data. So we have to really move forward with that, with combining information that comes from satellites and information that are more local information, and combine them to make the most, to know where to act and how to act best.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I think going beyond the land surface temperature to air temperature is really important. And so following on what Lenio was saying, we are seeing more and more cities identify sensor networks as an important aspect of this, both in terms of establishing their own, which is challenging and costly, but also using existing services like Weather Underground and others, where people have their own weather stations that are not as accurate or high quality as sort of your Met Services weather stations, but provide a blanket of measurements across the city. And so, for example, the Oxford cooling program is looking at how you scrub that data so that you can account for some of the inaccuracies that you may get from the lower quality sensors, but then still taking advantage of this free resource of a blanket of sensors across the city. And then the other one I'd mention is it's short in terms of the temporal time, but very high resolution, and that's doing vehicular or bike transects of cities or neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So the U.S. NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, which is our Met Service, where our Met Service is housed, has a program called Heatwatch. This year is the first year they're doing this program. So they have a series of scientists that come out and do not just a transect of a particular city, but it's also a citizen science engagement opportunity. So it has both an outward sort of media focus, but also what comes out of it is this very granular, high resolution map of a city on one day. So it doesn't tell you everything you'd want to know, but it gives you a really good sense of where you're hot and when. They're, for the first time this year, looking at doing cities outside the U.S. So they actually have their first grants out for this for non-U.S. cities, and they're going to continue to do that. So that is another opportunity that to really get an understanding of where you're hot and
yeah,
where you're exposed.
Some cities have done that, Kurt, around the world as well, using both bicycles and landing these sensors on bicycles and going around different people from the municipality and kind of get. I think Melbourne even has done that. But yeah, cities are being creative with all that. Sensors, cheap, many, it's good.
And I think
you can put them everywhere.
And I think a question that ties in very well to our current conversation is what Stefan Alexic, who's one of the founders of an application that encourages people to walk and bike in our country. So he's asked about whether the information that we're gathering in UNDP in terms of the projects Anita and Armen referred to, or generally should be or can be uploaded and shared in an open format so that people can build the entire ecosystem, grassroots ecosystems around them with that open data and play around with it. So Anita, Armen, any thoughts on this open data question? And perhaps we can tie it in with yesterday's event about the importance of open data for democracies. Yeah.
Anita, go ahead.
Yes, whenever we support a project, all information, data, etc., are available, and whoever is interested, yes, can approach us, and we can provide this data. We were also supporting the government and even the city of Skopje, actually, with the open data, government open data partnership. For example, the inventory of greenhouse gases is public, all the information available. Concretely about these heat islands, I would say that we can contact the professors who are working from FINCI Faculty of Computer Engineering, and then get whatever data people would need. But yes, we can work, and we are dedicated to work more on providing access to everyone, whether it is academia or public, to use this data.
And Kurt and Eleni, feel free to reflect on this point as well. Armen, you too, on the importance of open data for this type of challenges. Yeah.
Maybe just 2 words on my side on data, based on the experience not only in North Macedonia, but also in some other countries. Not always the data is shared, possessed, developed and used for the benefit of the cause. There are a number of cases in our region where data related to climate change, environment, disaster, I'm not sure about the heats, but these 3 for sure, is actually possessed by a public institution and shared for a fee. So they can share it with another public institution free. But if you are a think tank, if you are a private company, if you are someone who is trying to make life a little bit easier, then you have to pay for it. And I don't think this is the right approach. So for us, obviously, we get the data, we share it. But at the same time, it's not always the same. And perhaps this is also something that digitalization can help with. While there are some records in some of the countries that are still not digitalized. And if you are developing your scenarios based on the historical data obtained from before, it's not something that comes handy. You really need to digitalize it first and then develop based on them, develop your scenarios. Over.
Perfect. Thank you, Armen and Anita. We have a question that comes from Grigoryan, who is currently, he is a civil society activist, but currently also serves as a council member in the city of Skopje. And also Mila has a very similar question, so I'll try to tie both of them in. They talk about how do we encourage cities and institutions and communities to plan in terms of longer terms. So how do we ensure, for instance, that good initiatives that have happened in the city are not left behind when a new city administration comes, or for instance, when there's a disruption within the council? So how do we ensure this long-term planning within cities, and what were some of the reflections perhaps from the speakers on that point?
Maybe, Lazar, I can respond both for the green cadastre and for the green roofs. First, in general, whenever we develop a project with certain partner, one of the main things that we discussed is how to ensure sustainability and how to ensure that after the project is closed, whatever we do will continue to exist or will be maintained. The same approach was applied for these certain activities for construction of the green roofs and for the green cadastre. So for the green cadastre, from the very beginning, because as mentioned, there were 5 or 6 phases of the project, the respective department of the city of Skopje was involved in the activities in planning and even realization, because they were the one that were entering data for all the recordings that were done by external partner. Also, the public enterprise for greenery management, green areas and parks management was involved, and then some of the people there were trained how to do it. And there was always an open, I would say, offer to train more people so they can undertake it. Unfortunately, yes, we know there were frequent changes in the public enterprise, in the city of Skopje, some reorganizations, and UNDP can do certain things. We always, when we have partners and follow-up meetings with the partners, in this case, the city of Skopje, we are mentioning and trying to ensure that this is taken care. But it's, again, after the project is finished, it's the responsibility of our partners to maintain, and if there is a need, we can provide some additional support, but we cannot be the substitute, or we cannot replace the local governments of doing certain things. When it comes to the green roofs, starting from Gataca, the first green roof that we did, there was an agreement with the city of Skopje, but also with the managing authority or the managing entities of Gataca, that they will invest in maintaining. We had some ideas with them, we presenting these ideas, how to ensure that there will be funds generated that will be used later for maintenance of this space. Unfortunately, that it didn't work, and this is a shared company, shareholders company, and they were facing with certain problems also lately. I would not agree that these 2 areas are fully abandoned, they are not maintained, they are not in the same shape as they were, but they are not, I would say, totally neglected. And I hope that Gataca and also the city of Skopje will take care. I would say, Grigoryan, because Laza, you already mentioned Grigoryan as a civil activist, he is member of the city council. So city council is, I would say, a fora that can provide an environment to discuss these issues, not just for this project or other projects, talking about, again, how to ensure the sustainability of donors' intervention. UNDP is not a donor, but all donors want to see sustainability. They want to see that their projects are continuing and that there is commitment on the side of the national partners. So as UNDP, we are willing and we are on your disposal to, again, raise certain issues and help further to, if there is a need to strengthen the capacities and work with the local government if needed and the public enterprise. But I cannot accept that this was not taken into consideration when developing the plan, because the right people, the right entities were involved and training was provided. So we can, again, work together, and we are willing to continue the collaboration with the city of Skopje, because a lot has been invested, and by the end of this month we are planning to promote a kind of a brochure that will highlight all the what we have achieved together with the city of Skopje in the last, I would say, 10 years.
Thank you very much, Anita. Eleni, Kurt, if you want to share of your experience in terms of longer term planning and the importance to have this extensive or continuity in this type of projects, feel free.
just to
Sorry?
briefly say, oh, go ahead, Linnea.
No, I was giving the floor to you.
I was beyond planning. I think this really gets to the issue of how we properly value these investments and how we think about them, not just as benefits that are generated to the city, but also how we fund and finance and transfer the risk from these projects. Because if we're capturing the value of these projects appropriately, they'll be maintained, the market will maintain them, and the owners will maintain them. I think working on a political cycle of is challenging. And things change fast. So I think it's bringing in more of the market approach to what we're doing in this space will, I think, really help lengthen the along with a longer planning cycle. I think help lengthen the sustainability of these projects and have a real economic reason to do so.
Which is difficult for the type of projects that we're talking about, especially when we're talking about adaptation and resilience, because there's very little return on investment. So this is it's a hard sell, but when we it's difficult. It's not easy, but we have to do it, and especially when we're dealing with issues that have to do with nature-based solutions and green and blue infrastructure. We really have to build within often the municipalities don't budget things in the long term. They budget like the creation of a park or the creation of something that really needs to put in the budgets for many years ahead. And we often don't in municipalities. We don't do that kind of budgeting. Because because these kinds of projects, anyway, we all know what we're talking about, so I don't need to.
Well, thank you very much. There are a couple of comments that celebrate the activities that you were talking about, and one more question from our colleague Alexandra, who talks about the materials and the incentives that municipalities have to encourage citizens and institutions to use lighter materials or materials with lighter color or natural-based materials. But Alexandra is right next door in our office, but we'll wait for that question to be answered in one of our follow-up meetings because we're running out of time. I just wanted to take the time to thank you all for participating in this webinar. It's the first time we're collaborating with both Eleni and Kurt, so thank you so much for your time and energy. Armen and Anita know this. We have an entire HEAT informal group within our country office consisted of Armen, Anita, Alexandra, my colleagues.
Amazing.
Exactly.
That is, you guys have been doing incredible work. It's impressive.
Thank you so much, Eleni, and thank you again. Yeah. And finally, I would like to thank the entire audience members who managed to stay until the end of this 90 minutes webinar. Thank you all for the time and effort, and let's keep the conversation alive. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Take care.